René Descartes. René Descartes was a major contributor to what was known as modern science during 1596 to 1650. Descartes suggested that whereas the mind is the source of ideas and thoughts, the body is a machine-like structure to be studied and understood. Phrenology. Phrenology was one approach to the mind-body problem. Even though skeptics ran phrenology out of business, the basic tenet of phrenology suggested that one could uncover and understand someone's personality by feeling and interpreting the bumps on the head. Psychophysics. The area of psychophysics is probably the area of closest transition from philosophers studying behavior to psychologists studying behavior. Three researchers were key in the founding of psychology: Hermann von Helmholtz, Ernst Weber, and Gustav Theodor Fechner. Hermann von Helmholtz. Hermann von Helmholtz was interested in the general area of psychophysics. Psychophysics is a study of the interaction between the behavioral capabilities and limitations of the human perceptual system and the environment. Basically, how do we literally interpret the world we live in? Ernst Weber. He studied a broader perspective of psychophysics. Weber was interested in all the sensory systems and how the world worked. It was Weber who gave psychology the concept of just noticeable difference, that is, the smallest difference between two stimuli that can be noted by a person.
Gustav Fechner. Gustav Fechner was considered the father of experimental psychology, and he expanded on Weber's ideas. Wundtian psychology and structuralism. Wilhelm Wundt was the founder of psychology. He is credited with forming the first psychology lab. Wundt's greatest influence was noted in the mentoring of his students. One of these students happened to be Edward Titchener. Structuralism, the study of the anatomy of the mind as a system of psychology, shares some common characteristics with Wundt's ideas. Functionalism. Functionalism is important to the history of American psychology because it is a system of psychology that is uniquely American. Three men were instrumental in promoting functionalism: William James, G. Stanley Hall, and James Cattell. Whereas structuralism focused on discovering the structure of consciousness and how its contents are organized and stored, functionalists were more interested in how the mind worked, what mental processes accomplish, and what role consciousness plays in our behavior.
William James, noted in the transition period from structuralism to functionalism for his clarity of thought and strong opposition to Titchener. James supported introspection and the experimental method. Stanley Hall, a contributor to the founding of functionalism and noted for founding the first American psychological laboratory at Johns Hopkins University, as well as founding the American Psychological Association. James Cattell. Cattell was a student of Stanley Hall in his laboratory at Johns Hopkins University, and he later went on to study with Wilhelm Wundt in Germany. Cattell's greatest contribution was his focus on a practical, test-oriented approach to studying mental processes. The transition from structuralism to functionalism. This transition reflected the rapidly changing times in psychology. In just a span of 20 years, the major focal point of psychology shifted from Germany to America with a new and emerging focus on the work of Charles Darwin. Behaviorism. Behaviorism was proposed by John B. Watson, and it defined a relatively narrow field of interest. While proposing a continuity between man and animals so that animals are an appropriate avenue of study to understand humans, he also dictated that all mentalistic concepts were useless.